Alright guys, in this video I'm going to talk about briefly what defenses I go into when I'm expecting certain sets or a certain grouping. And what I mean by that is the most frequently asked question that I get is, well, when do you run this defense? You know, what do you do when you see this? Um, and pretty much that's what I want to hit on in this first initial video, and that's going to explain when to run these defenses, just because in this game you can't just blitz every down. You can't send the same thing over and over again. There's no dominant defense that you can run 100% of the time. So you do have to mix it up, and luckily we do have enough blitzes that we can do that pretty successfully. Now, I've mentioned all along this year, I do believe that coverage defenses are the best base defenses to use. Um, but first of all, with that being said, we'll get into the blitzes and how they work, why they work, and what we like to when we like to go to those blitzes. So we do have a couple variations out of the 3-4 odd that we go through, and pretty much this is our favorite like heavy blitzing formation. If we're going to send 5-6 people, this is going to be the formation we do it out of. And that's because it's the hardest pressure to pick up. You can pick up the blitz, obviously. Now, we do have variations that are pretty much impossible to pick up, but they require a lot of heavy blitzing. So that's when we like to use the 3-4 odd, when we have our opponent in a third and long, fourth and long situation, or even if we just need our opponent off the field. When they're sitting there dinking and dunking down the field, picking up first downs here and there, if we need that key stop, I go to this defense frequently in those situations. And that's, like I said, we got plenty of variations to these blitzes, so I'll break down and I'll explain about them more in detail as we get into the setups. But that is pretty much, this is my heavy blitzing formation, that being 3-4 odd. Now, I do use 3-4 under. This is a formation that I use when I'm sending B-gap style of pressure. Similar to like the slant show 2 at a nickel. I think that's the name of it, slant show buzz or whatever it's called. But it works the same way. You get B-gap pressure from the left, comes in versus single back and shotgun. You can use a couple different plays. Cover 3 cloud is one. Free safety slant 3 is another. But we'll get into that setup as well. But pretty much this is a situational blitz. It's not something you want to run every down. It's not the best run D, but it is good pressure, and it's different pressure from what we typically are sending. So it does have its place in here. It is just a situational, run it every once in a while just to throw your opponent off guard. In terms of 3-4 over, now 3-4 over, the only blitz we have is crossfire. Now this is my base defense when I'm trying to blitz. So pretty much I have two base defenses, and that's the quarter 3 deep, which I'll get into. That's just a pure coverage D. It's a coverage D that's hard to pass on. You can stop the run, and pretty much you force your opponent to dink and dunk down the field, and if they try for those big plays, they're going to get stopped. Now 3-4 over is kind of different. Like, it's based mostly on just taking away their first read, knowing the pressure is going to come in by that blitzing linebacker. You can send anywhere from 3 people to 6 people, depending on what you're expecting. Now, I tend to send at most probably 5, but you can send 6 and get great pressure. Now, that is the only blitz I run at a 3-4 over, that being the crossfire 3. 3-4 solid, something I broke down a while ago. It does have its place. It's very similar to the 3-4 bear. The only difference is we have a cover 2 blitz that we can run and a cover 4. You can also do the same thing out of cover 6. You could do it out of man if you really want to, but it's good pressure that's hard to pick up, and it complements our 3-4 bear defense perfectly. And that's because we're able to kill play action at a 3-4 bear, and we are also able to get a 3-man A gap, as well as a B gap blitz from the right um, that comes in similar to how the dime defense works. So that's pretty much the 3-4 normal formations. We have blitzes out of every single one of these formations, and the thing that's great about them is that they tend to come in from different spots. So it's going to force our opponent to actually think and read our defense um, instead of just coming out in the same 4 verticals play, same pass protection and picking the defense up. So now moving along though, we have the 3-3-5, nickel 3-3-5. That defense is predominantly a run D. The cover 2 man, this is also a defense I go to heavy inside the red zone. The reason I like it in the red zone is it's going to box every run, and then we're able to move those safeties around and put them in different zones to take away, the first read that our opponent's going to look for. So it's a nice defense in general. It's predominantly used for my run D. So if I see if I see my opponent coming out in a lot of 2 running backs or 2 tight end sets, this is something I'll go to pretty frequently. Now you can use other plays. I've broken down the crash 2 blitz. I've broken down how you can blitz out of a couple different formations, like the 3 overload press, the nickel LB blitz. I mean, you can blitz out of a couple plays, but predominantly this is a coverage D. So that is pretty much it. That's all I use it for. So we'll move right along. I don't use anything out of these other nickel sets. Now the 2-4-5 double A gap, that does have the field goal block play, that being the nickel overload 3. Depending on how scummy you want to be, if you really want the win, you don't care how you get it, or simply if your opponent does it to you, I'm going to show you how to block those field goals as well. So big dime, this is something that Pete likes to run a lot, or he did like to run it. This was a defense he ran during the first Draft Champions series, and it's not the greatest defense in the world, but it's going to stop the run for the most part. It's going to randomly get A gap, and it's overall a good coverage D. So we'll go ahead and we'll show that to you as well. Then obviously you have Big Dime 146. This is also a phenomenal coverage D. Now we do have blitzes out of this, like the crossfire. You could get good pressure out of the Mike SS3 seam, get it out of the Mike SS1 dog. We'll go over all that, but predominantly this is a coverage D, and this is also a defense that I like to use the finesse glitch out of, which I'll be breaking down in a video. So we'll go ahead and get into that. Once again, that's just a coverage D, something that's going to, force our opponent to respect, the coverage and the blitz, but it's mostly coverage. And then quarters, you have the 1-3-7 defense, the D Jones defense that everybody calls it. We can blitz out of it. This is something that I used to use a lot more than I do now, but it is still a phenomenal defense that gives a lot of people problems. And then finally, the quarter 3 deep that I mentioned pretty much stops the run, really difficult to pass on, and we have some 6-man blitzes out of it that are annoying to deal with, if mixed in. So that's the Kansas City book in a nutshell. So we'll go ahead and we'll get into all of those setups now. So pretty much the way that you want to scheme these is if you see anything with 2 running backs or 2 tight ends, I like to go to the nickel 3-3-5 as a base defense. That's the 2-man under. If you see a 3 receiver set, the first thing you want to do is to stop the inside zone, and you can do that out of the 3 deep, quarter 3 deep. Anything like a 4 receiver set, 5 receiver set, I personally like to blitz those formations because I know they don't typically have inside zones out of many of them, and I go to 3-4 out of that, oddly enough. So into the setups we go.